Hi, I'm Liz Coleman, and today I will be discussing my macro intervention, which is increasing access to mental health care services for diverse populations. Minorities face many barriers to health. Minorities face many barriers to accessing mental health. There are cultural and systemic barriers that impede Black, African American, Latinx, and impoverished populations from accessing mental health care and resources in the US. Marginalized communities suffer from high rates of depression, anxiety, and PTSD related to systemic discrimination, racism, prejudice, political justice, civil violence, and intergenerational trauma. My intervention that I am proposing is a multi-platform social media-focused public health campaign centered on socio-cultural awareness aimed at demystifying therapy, counseling, and mental health services, and that they can be a transformative intervention to increase social awareness, destigmatize mental health issues, and access to therapy, while positioning minorities as help-seeking clients to increase normalization of the subject, broaden current ways of dealing with mental health struggles, and showcase culturally and ethnically relevant helping workers as practitioners. This is basically to change the cultural knowledge and the cultural perception of seeking mental health resources, and also identifying one's own needs to accessing resources as well. So there are some factors that inhibit people from accessing healthcare, and this is very much a cultural look. So looking at some stigma barriers and rates, 1/4 of African Americans seek mental health care versus 40% of white Americans who do. Some cultural beliefs and stigmas that limit access of minorities, specifically Black, African American, and Latino, and impoverished communities is the history of experiences that remain in the consciousness of marginalized populations. So forced institutionalization as punishment for non-subservient behavior. We can see this in the color purple as a social and cultural reference. There are socio-cultural stigmas within marginalized communities that there are certain practices that these communities and these populations engage in to deal with their mental health and emotional issues. So some of the social cultural stigmas are the ability to take care of oneself, to be self-sufficient. There are issues with cultural identity, such as masculinity, femininity, and self-reliance, like I just mentioned. There's also misinformation on what therapy is and what mental health concerns are pertaining to individuals, especially individuals who have suffered racism, discrimination, prejudice, and oppression within the United States. There's also reliance on families, friends, religion, religious clergy, religious people, even the idea of personal prayer for some emotional support rather than seeking mental health services. There's also a bias of the privacy that often in Black communities, there's a notion of what happens in the home stays in the home. Same thing with Latino and Latinx communities. The benefits of therapy and destigmatization. Frapp and Carlson, in their article, Exploring the Influence of Attitude and Stigma on Participation of African American and Latino Populations in Mental Health, report that mental health-related stigma is a macro system that maintains negative views from people, media, society, and social influences collectively. So the idea of stigmatization also, the concept in theory, states that when there's stigmatization and a population is stigmatized, it decreases one's ability to have self-determination, to actualize one's best life. The audience that I'm specifically looking at, again, are Black, African Americans, Latinos, Latinx, and impoverished communities. There's a cultural dialogue on mental health currently taking place through social media, TV awareness campaigns, and digital resources, although these campaigns are very stratified. And I propose a unified, very organized and thorough offering of social media and digital services, such as expanding the narrative of access, dissemination of information, increasing visibility, and engaging participation and relevance to marginalized communities. Currently, these are some examples of what is going on in the Black and Latinx communities dealing with expanding the cultural dialogue currently. There's a shift in collective knowledge of social and cultural influencers, as well as what I propose to incorporating my intervention. So being able to unite musicians, activists, very big names in social change and in cultural production, such as Oprah. She has many platforms that disseminate knowledge to a great deal of people, very far-reaching bandwidth there. And so being able to unite all of these community and social influencers would give the intervention a much stronger platform to disseminate the knowledge and to begin normalization of the understanding of accessing mental health care, such as therapy for Black girls. And she has a project called Help a Sister Out, which helps to call out issues of stigmatization within the Black community regarding mental health care. And being able to provide these narratives on a bigger landscape helps to change the dominant narrative. Being able to combine all of these resources into one larger sociocultural product could be very transformative. And then we can also look at, in the Latinx community, finding a therapist who meets your personal cultural needs, and as well as demystifying the process and what is therapy about. Again, my macro intervention is a public awareness campaign. It's removing the stigma of mental health access. And so I propose to create and fund a national public health campaign rooted in a multi-platform digital communication, employing storytelling, information to access services and mental health concerns, most pressing to Black, Latinx, impoverished communities, that normalizes seeking help within the therapeutic and mental health communities. And the product of this would be creating short PSAs and videos explaining how to access therapy. What is a first session like? What is your role as a client? What are your rights and responsibilities? What power do you have? How to advocate for yourself in a therapeutic setting? How to find a therapist in the first place? When do you know that it's time to seek help from a professional? And the contextualization of social issues that create mental illness, such as racism, poverty, prejudice, segregation, histories of trauma, and as well covering notions and information based on the biology of mental illness as well. So it's not just an external factor, but an internal factor.